Admittedly, this nomination is unconventional. The nominee is unconventional, just like that New York developer who rode down the escalator in 2015 to announce his candidacy for president. That may be what makes Mr. Hegseth an excellent choice to improve this unacceptable status quo that I just described. He is a decorated post-9/11 combat veteran. He will inject a new warrior ethos into the Pentagon, a spirit that can cascade from the top down. Mr. Hegseth will bring energy and fresh ideas to shake up the bureaucracy. He will focus relentlessly on the warfighter and the military's core missions, deterring wars and winning the ones we must fight. He will bring a swift end to corrosive distractions such as DEI.
Acknowledge the concerning public reports against you. A variety of sources, including your own writings, implicate you with disregarding the laws of war, financial mismanagement, racist and sexist remarks about men and women in uniform, alcohol abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other troubling issues. I have reviewed many of these allegations and find them extremely alarming. Indeed, the totality of your own writings and alleged conduct would disqualify any service member from holding any leadership position in the military, much less being confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. The challenge of the Secretary of Defense is to remove partisan politics from the military. You propose to inject it. This would be an insult to the men and women who have sworn to uphold their own apolitical duty to the Constitution. Mr. Hegseth, you are the 9th nominee for Secretary of Defense that I've had the honor to consider as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I have voted in favor of all your predecessors, including those in the first Trump administration. Unfortunately, you lack the character and composure and competence to hold the position of Secretary of Defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reed, members of the committee, my former colleagues. I'm honored to introduce a son of Minnesota to you, Pete Hegseth. As a senator from Minnesota, I spent many hours with this young man as he walked the halls of Congress advocating on behalf of America's veterans. And he is young in the best sense of the word. He is strong, focused, intelligent, incisive, a great listener, and is almost supernaturally energetic, just what we need in a Secretary of Defense in times of massive change. He is the real deal. F. Scott Fitzgerald was a writer in my city of St. Paul, and so the problem with America is that there are no second acts. He was wrong. Pete was a brave soldier, has been an able communicator, and I believe is about to begin a great second act as our Secretary of Defense. He has struggled and overcome great personal challenges. Please don't give in to the cynical notion that people can't change. We need the ones who can change to lead us, to be beacons of hope, and to remind us that grace can lead us home. 4 years ago, President Biden's nominee, Lloyd Austin, a good and honorable man, received 97 votes on the floor of the Senate. And we went through the debacle of the Afghanistan withdrawal. Putin invaded Ukraine. The Houthis endanger our shipping lanes. We witnessed Israeli miracles against America's enemies in the Middle East, where the United States was more of an impediment than a help. Our recruitment numbers have sunk dramatically, and our southern border has suffered a slow but dangerous invasion. Yes, Pete Hegseth is an out-of-the-box nominee, and I say it's high time to get out of the box. One more thought. The country longs for a government of less division and more respect and dignity. My hope is that this committee hearing provides what they are asking for. Disagree? Yes. Strongly if necessary. But then come together to support the nominee, this nominee, Pete Hegseth, of the one president we have at a time, laying aside partisan politics for the essential mission of national security upon which everything else depends.
Thanks, Congressman Walz, for whatever opening statement and introduction he might make.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, and Chairman has a very nice ring to it, so congratulations, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of this committee. It is a privilege to appear before you today and urge the members of this committee to confirm Pete Hegseth as our next Secretary of Defense. And I'm not here today just to advocate on behalf of a future colleague, but to speak on behalf of someone I consider a dear friend for over a decade now. Like Pete, I served in the U.S. Army. Like Pete, I'm a veteran. We deployed to Afghanistan and all over the world at the height of the war on terror, which is the war of our generation. And like thousands of other warfighters, we've witnessed the hardships of war. We've experienced the loss of friends in combat. We've endured too much time away from family and friends, and no one, I can promise you this, no one hates war more than those who have had to go fight it. No one does. Pete's story, though, isn't that much different from the millions of other veterans, and they know it, and they appreciate him for the experiences that he's gone through. And after our country was brutally attacked on 9/11, Pete Hegseth answered the call of duty like so many others. He put the interests of this country ahead of his own. And I can tell you firsthand, as can the heroes sitting in this audience behind me, Pete's character of country, his selflessness, his duty, these are the key tenets that have shaped him into the leader that he is today. These are the traits that President Trump recognized when making the decision to nominate Pete for this critical role. He will bring the perspective of being the first Secretary of Defense to have served as a junior officer on the front lines, not in the headquarters, on the front lines in the war on terror, and recognizes the human costs, the financial costs, and the policy drift that was discussed often in this very room that led us to decades and decades of war. So not only does he understand the threats he faces, but as the chairman mentioned, he is brilliant, in my mind, at communicating those to the American people in a way that is often not communicated in Washington, D.C., to reach out to the American people so that they understand why the military needs to do what it needs to do. And look, I have no doubt that he is going to get the Pentagon back to its primary mission, lethal readiness. That warrior enemies will respect. That warrior ethos is what our enemies will fear, and it's that warrior ethos that will keep the peace. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in my humble opinion, our military deserves better than it's getting. Our country faces a devastating recruitment crisis. Men and women are not volunteering to serve at the levels required. Our readiness is down. Our costs are up. And it seems like nearly every major weapon system, again, often discussed in this very room, is costing too much, delivering too little, and taking way too long. The bottom line is the status quo is unacceptable. It's not working. And the members of this committee, you all know it. You know it's not working. And the members of the House Armed Services know it's not working. And we have hearing after hearing, year after year. And here we are, decades later, describing the same problems. The Pentagon has continuously failed audits. The businesses that want to do business with the Pentagon have to pass an audit, but the entity itself fails an audit. Innovation is stalled, morale is down, standards have been weakened, and meritocracy is less valued. And as a result, our adversaries have been emboldened all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for change. It is time for change. You all have literally seen thousands of veterans, as the chairman cited one amazing Medal of Honor recipient. But we have seen thousands of veterans expressing their support for Pete. This is a man who can reinvigorate that warrior ethos, and this is a man that will lead. I can't imagine having a more capable partner in my position as National Security Advisor. Pete is a man of family, of faith, and he's committed to making our country strong again. And most importantly, and brother, I know this in my core, he will always have as a first principle the service members that are out there on the front lines for all of us at the heart of every decision he makes. So, senators, I urge you to support this confirmation. It is critical that President Trump has his national security team in place for the challenges ahead, and I thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and all the members of this committee for this opportunity today. I'm grateful for and have learned a great deal from this advise and consent process. Our founders knew what they were doing. Should I be confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee, senators from both parties, to secure our nation. I want to thank the former senator from Minnesota, Norm Coleman, for his mentorship and friendship in this process, and the incoming National Security Advisor, Congressman, and more importantly for our purposes, Colonel Mike Waltz, for his powerful words. I'm grateful to them both. Thank you to my incredible wife, Jennifer, who has changed my life and been with me throughout this entire process. I love you, sweetheart, and I thank God for you. And as Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done. Thank you to my father, Brian, and mother, Penny, as well as our entire family, including our 7 wonderful kids, Gunnar, Jackson, Peter Boone, Kensington, Luke, Rex, sorry, it's a lot of them, and Gwendolyn. Their future safety and security is in all of our hands. And to all the troops and veterans watching and here in the room, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, soldiers, pilots, sailors, Marines, Gold Stars, and more, too many friends to name. Officers, enlisted, black and white, young and old, men and women, all Americans, all warriors. This hearing is for you. Thank you for figuratively and literally having my back.
Not only that, you are as Christian Zionists, and you support the war in Gaza by the Zionists.
I want to thank the authorities for their swift reaction to that outburst and state that similar interruptions will be treated in like manner. Mr. Hegseth, you may continue.
Well, as I'll say again, thank you for figuratively and literally having my back. I pledge to do the same for all of you. It's an honor to come before this committee today as President Donald Trump's nominee for the office of Secretary of Defense. 2 months ago, 77 million Americans gave President Trump a powerful mandate for change, to put America first, at home and abroad. I want to thank President Trump for his faith in me and his selfless leadership for our republic. The troops have no better commander-in-chief than Donald Trump. As I've said to many of you in private meetings, when President Trump chose me for this position, the primary charge he gave me was to bring the warrior culture back to the Department of Defense. He, like me, wants a Pentagon laser-focused on lethality, meritocracy, warfighting, accountability, and readiness.
You may continue, sir.
Returning the Pentagon back to warfighting, that's it. That's my job.
Mr. Hegseth, suspend your remarks. Let me just say this. The Capitol Police are going to remove immediately individuals that are disrupting the hearing. I see a pattern attempted to be inflicted on the committee, and we're simply not going to tolerate that. You may proceed.
To bring back warfighting, if confirmed, I'm going to work with President Trump and this committee to, 1, restore the warrior ethos to the Pentagon and throughout our fighting force. In doing so, we will reestablish trust in our military, addressing the recruiting crisis, the retention crisis, and readiness crisis in our ranks.
Members of the security force will remove members. Mr. Hegseth, you may.
The strength of our military is our unity and our shared purpose, not our differences. Number two, we're going to rebuild our military, always matching threats to capabilities. This includes reviving our defense industrial base, reforming the acquisitions process. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, no more valley of death for new defense companies, modernizing our nuclear triad, ensuring the Pentagon can pass an audit, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies. And number three, we're going to reestablish deterrence. First and foremost, we will defend our homeland, our borders, and our skies. Second, we will work with our partners and allies to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific from the Communist Chinese. And finally, we will responsibly end wars to ensure that we prioritize our resources to reorient to larger threats. We can no longer count on reputational deterrence. We need real deterrence. The Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength. And in pursuing these America First national security goals, will remain patriotically apolitical and stridently constitutional. Unlike the current administration, politics should play no part in military matters. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are American warriors. Our standards will be high, and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word. We need to make sure every warrior is fully qualified on their assigned weapons system, every pilot's fully qualified and current on the aircraft they are flying, and every general or flag officer is selected for leadership or promotion purely based on performance, readiness, and merit. Leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. This has been my focus ever since I first put on the uniform as a young Army ROTC cadet at Princeton University in 2001. I joined the military because I love my country and felt an obligation to defend it. I served with incredible Americans in Guantanamo Bay, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and on the streets of Washington, D.C., many of which are with me here today. This includes enlisted soldiers I helped become American citizens, and Muslim allies I helped immigrate from Iraq and Afghanistan. Because when I took off the uniform, my mission never stopped. Now, it is true and has been acknowledged that I don't have a similar biography to defense secretaries of the last 30 years. But as President Trump also told me, we've repeatedly placed people atop the Pentagon with supposedly the right credentials, whether they are retired generals, academics, or defense contractor executives. And where has it gotten us? He believes, and I humbly agree, that it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm. A change agent, someone with no vested interest in certain companies or specific programs or approved narratives. My only special interest is the warfighter. Deterring wars, and if called upon, winning wars by ensuring our warriors never enter a fair fight. We let them win, and we bring them home. Like many of my generation, I've been there. I've led troops in combat. I've been on patrol for days. I've pulled the trigger down range, heard bullets whiz by, flex-cuffed insurgents, called in close air support, led medevacs, dodged IEDs, pulled out dead bodies, and knelt before a battlefield cross. This is not academic for me. This is my life. I led then, and I will lead now. Ask anyone who's ever worked for me or with me. I know what I don't know. My success as a leader, and I very much look forward to discussing my organization's successes at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done. But my success as a leader has always been setting a clear vision, hiring people smarter and more capable than me, empowering them to succeed, holding everyone accountable, and driving toward clear metrics. Build the plan, work the plan, and then work harder than everyone else around you. I've sworn an oath to the Constitution before, and if confirmed, I will proudly do it again. This time, for the most important deployment of my life. I pledge to be a faithful partner to this committee, taking input and respecting oversight. We share the same goals: a ready, lethal military, the health and well-being of our troops, and a strong and secure America. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
You and your family have endured criticism of your nomination since it was announced in November. Let's get into this allegation about sexual assault, inappropriate workplace behavior, alcohol abuse, and financial mismanagement during your time as a nonprofit executive. I should note that the majority of these have come from anonymous sources in liberal media publications. But I want to give you an opportunity to respond to these allegations, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that opportunity. You are correct. We undertook this responsibility with an obligation to the troops to do right by them for our warfighters. And what became very evident to us from the beginning, there was a coordinated smear campaign orchestrated in the media against us. Balance of mind. I'm not a perfect person, as has been acknowledged. Saved by the grace of God, by Jesus and Jenny. I'm not a perfect person, but redemption is real. And God forged me in ways that I know I'm prepared for. Good morning, Senator.
I was pleased when I was contacted on your behalf about meeting before this hearing. I've been on this committee since 2011, and during that time, I voted to confirm 6 nominees to be Secretary of Defense from 3 administrations, 2 Democratic and 1 Republican, the first Trump administration. Every one of those nominees met with me and my Democratic colleagues on this committee before the hearing. So, as you can imagine, I was disappointed when no one ever followed up. When we followed up with your office, you were not able to meet. Do you understand that if you're confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, that you will have a responsibility to meet with all members of this committee, not just Republicans?
Senator, I very much appreciate and understand the traditionally bipartisan nature of this committee. Their national defense is not partisan. It should not be about Republicans or Democrats. And so I look forward to working together with you and your colleagues on priorities facing this nation. Yes?
I think we would expect that. And one reason that I wanted to meet with you was because I thought it would be really helpful to better understand your views on women in the military. Because you've made a number of surprising statements about women serving in the military. As recently as November the 7th of 2024 on the Sean Ryan Show, you said, and I quote, "I'm straight up saying that we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective." The quote went on a little longer, but that was the gist of it. That was before you were nominated to be Secretary of Defense. Mr. Hegseth, do you know what percentage of our military is comprised of women?
I believe it's 18 to 20%, Senator.
It's almost 18%, and in fact, DOD's 2023 demographic report indicated that there are more women serving now, and there are fewer separations. So they make up a critical part of our military, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, ma'am. Women in our military, as I have said publicly, have and continue to make amazing contributions across all aspects of our battlefield.
Well, you also write in your book, The War on Warriors, with the chapter, The Deadly Obsession with Women Warriors, that, quote, "Not only are women comparatively less effective than men in combat roles, but they are more likely to be objectified by the enemy and their own nation in the moral realms of war." Mr. Hegseth, should we take it to believe that you believe that the 2 women on this committee who have served honorably and with distinction made our military less effective and less capable?
I'm incredibly grateful for the 2 women who've served our military in uniform and including in the Central Intelligence Agency, contributions on the battlefield, indispensable contributions. Senator, I would like to clarify, when I'm talking about that issue, it's not about the capabilities of men and women, it's about standards. And this committee has talked a lot about standards. Standards that we, unfortunately, over time, have seen eroded in certain duty positions, certain schools, certain places, which affects readiness, which is what I care about the most, readiness on the battlefield.
I appreciate that.
And so my comments point time and time again to standards.
Your statements publicly have not been to that effect.
We've got a big audience here. Many of them seem to be patriotic supporters of you, Mr. Hegseth. Some of them seem to be liberal critics of you. I would note that it's only the liberal critics that have disrupted this hearing. As was my custom during the Biden administration, I want to give you a chance to respond to what they said about you. I think the first one accused you of being a Christian Zionist. I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I am a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is their great ally.
Thank you. Because another protester, and I think this one was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
And the third protester said something about 20 years of genocide. I assume that's our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think our troops are committing genocide in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Senator, I do not. I think our troops, as you know, as so many in this committee know, did the best they could with what they had. We're not the outcomes. And tragically, the outcome we saw in Afghanistan under the Biden administration put a stain on that, but it doesn't put a stain on what those men and women did in uniform, as you know full well, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I do want to thank you, particularly your public statements, because they are so hurtful to the men and women who are currently serving in the U.S. military. Harmful to morale, harmful to good order and discipline. If you are saying that women shouldn't be serving in the military, and I'm going to read you your quotes, because the quotes themselves are terrible. You will have to change how you see women to do this job well, and I don't know if you are capable of that. So I want to press on these issues that my colleague Jean Shaheen brought up, because she said it so well. So first of all, you answered your questionnaire. Do you believe that any American who wants to serve in their country in the military and can meet objective standards set by the military should be allowed to serve without limitation? You've said yes to that question. But then in all of these other circumstances, you've denigrated active duty service members. We have hundreds of women who are currently in the infantry, lethal members of our military serving in the infantry, but you degrade them. You say, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. So specific to Senator Cotton's question, because Senator Cotton was giving you layups to differentiate between different types of combat. And specifically, as Secretary, would you take any action to reinstitute the combat arms exclusion for female service members, knowing full well you have hundreds of women doing that job right now? And the standards, your 2 mile run, Tom, is about the Army Combat Fitness Test. It is not the requirements to have an MOS 11 Bravo, which is the infantry. These are the requirements today for people serving in the industry, men and women. They are gender neutral, and they are very difficult to meet. They have not been reduced in any way, and our combat units, our infantry is lethal. So please explain specifically, because you will be in charge of 3 million personnel. It is a big job. And when you make these public statements, and I get you were not Secretary of Defense then, I get you were on TV, I get you were helping veterans, I get it was a different job. But most recently, you said this in November of 2024, knowing full well you might have been named as Secretary of Defense. So please explain these types of statements, because they're brutal and they're mean. and they disrespect men and women who are willing to die for this country.
Well, Senator, I appreciate your comments, and I would point out I have never disparaged women serving in the military. I respect every single female service member that has put on the uniform, past and present. My critiques, Senator, recently and in the past, and from personal experience, have been instances where I've seen standards lowered, and you mentioned 11 Alpha, 11 Bravo, MOS, places in units, and the book that has been referenced multiple times here, The War on Warriors. I spent months talking to active duty service members, men and women, low ranks, high ranks, combat arms and not combat arms. And what each and every one of them told me, and which personal instances have shown me, is that in ways direct, indirect, overt, and subtle, standards have been changed inside infantry training units, ranger school, infantry battalions, to ensure that
Give me one example. Please give me an example. I get you're making these generalized statements.
Commanders meet quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that disparages those women
Commanders
who are
do
incredibly
not have to
capable
meet
of meeting
quotas
that
for the
standard.
infantry. Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist. And your statements are creating the impression that these exist, because they do not. There are not quotas. We want the most lethal force. But I'm telling you, having been here for 15 years, listening to testimony about men and women in combat and the type of operations that were successful in Afghanistan and in Iraq, women were essential for many of those units. When Ranger units went in to find where the terrorists hiding in Afghanistan or in Iraq, if they had a woman in the unit, they could go in, talk to the women in a village, say, where are the terrorists hiding? Where are the weapons hiding? And get crucial information to make sure that we can win that battle. So you cannot denigrate women in general, and your statements do that. We don't want women in the military, especially in combat. What a terrible statement. So please, do not deny that you've made those statements. You have. We take the responsibility of standards very seriously, and we will work with you. I'm equally distressed you would not meet with me before this hearing. We could have covered all of this before you came here, so I could get to the 15 other questions that I want to get to. So women, you have denigrated. You have also denigrated members of the LGBTQ community. Did you know that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place, we lost so many crucial personnel, over 1,000 in mission-critical areas. We lost 10% of all our foreign language speakers because of a political policy. You said in your statement, you don't want politics in the DOD. Everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love. So please know this to be a true statement. So you say it was a political thing. You say it undermined us, social engineering. I don't know why someone having to publicly say or not publicly say who they love is social engineering. I think having that policy in the first place was highly problematic. And as you said in your statement, do you agree anybody should be able to serve in the military if they meet the standards?
Senator, as the president has stated, I don't disagree with the overturn of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Great, because I don't want you thinking, can't serve if you're a mom, can't serve if you're LGBTQ, and then last, can't serve if you're a leftist. The statements you said about people who have views differently than you, that we're the enemy, are you saying that 50% of the DOD, if they hold liberal views or leftist views or are Democrats, are not welcome in the military? Are you saying that?
Senator, I volunteered to deploy to Afghanistan under Democrat President Barack Obama. I also volunteered to guard the inauguration of Joe Biden, but was denied the opportunity to serve because I was identified as an extremist by my own unit for a Christian tattoo.
Without objection.
These tax returns are yours. They have your signature. And I'm going to ask that members of the committee review them because they're the only documents I've asked for others. I've asked for the FBI report that would presumably document, it should have documented, this kind of financial mismanagement. And these are the 990s from that organization. By the year of 2011, donors had become so dissatisfied with that mismanagement, they, in effect, ousted you. They merged that organization with Military Families United, and thereafter, you joined a second organization as executive director.
In
the
between,
Concerned
Senator, I went
Veterans-
to Harvard
I want to
University
ask
for 2
you
years and
questions.
Afghanistan.
I want to ask you questions about Concerned Veterans for America. Again, another set of tax returns, the 990s from that organization. I ask they be made part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, both of those returns are now part of the record.
2011 to 2016. At the end of 2013, shortfall of $130,000. At the end of 2014, shortfall of $428,000. You had a surplus the following year, but then another deficit of $437,000. By the time you left, that organization had deep debts, including credit card transaction debts of about $75,000. That isn't the kind of fiscal management we want at the Department of Defense. We can't tolerate it. I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them. I would support you as the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I don't dispute your communication skills, but I believe that we are entitled to the facts here. I've asked for more documents. I assume you'd be willing to submit to an expanded FBI background check that interviews your colleagues, accountants, ex-wives, former spouses, sexual assault survivors, and others, and enable them to come forward.
Senator, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
But you would submit to it and support it.
I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
Thank you.
And focused on your fitness to serve, including your character and temperament and your overall qualifications to do the job. And I do appreciate the comments of Ranking Member Reed with his concerns regarding your nomination, because I share those concerns. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of all nominees to come before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following two initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
Senator, I was falsely accused in October of 2017. It was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
I don't think completely cleared is accurate, but the fact is that your own lawyer said that you entered into an NDA and paid a person who accused you of raping her a sum of money to make sure that she did not file a complaint. Reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know that
run directly
drinking on the job
contradictory to the
is
dozens of men and women at
not
Fox News
contemplated
Channel
and-
who
I'm not
I work
hearing-
with
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels. That includes you, of course. And frankly, as secretary, you will be on the job 24/7. You recently promised some of my Republican colleagues that you stopped drinking and won't drink if confirmed, correct?
Absolutely.
Will you resign as Secretary of Defense if you drink on the job, which is a 24/7 position?
I've made this commitment on behalf of
Will
the
you
men and women I'm
resign as
serving.
Secretary of Defense
I've
if
made this
you
commitment
drink
on
the
behalf
job?
of the men and women I'm serving.
I'm not
because it's the
hearing-
most important deployment
I'm not
of my
hearing an
life.
answer to my question, so I'm going to move on. While you have made that commitment, you will not commit to resigning if you drink on the job. As Secretary of Defense, you will swear an oath to the Constitution and not an oath to any man, woman, or president, correct?
Senator, on multiple occasions, including as a young second lieutenant, I have sworn an oath to the
Answer is
Constitution,
yes.
and I'm proud to do so. Yes, ma'am.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C., an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry
holding
out
a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured
Secretary
by
Esper?
rioters trying to jump over the fence, set
Again,
the church on fire, and destroy
You know
a
what?
statue.
That sounds to me that you will
Chaos.
comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg. Moving on. President-elect has attacked our allies in recent weeks, refusing to rule out using military force to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal, and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force, or would you comply with an order to take over the Panama Canal?
Senator, I will emphasize that President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful
We're
commander-in-chief
not
of
talking
this
about
country.
the election. My question is, would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would give me in any context.
That sounds to me that you would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal. Current DoD policy allows service members and eligible dependents to be reimbursed for travel associated with non-covered reproductive health care, including abortions. Will you maintain this common sense policy?
Senator, I've always been personally pro-life. I know President Trump has as well, and we will review all policies. But our standard is whatever the president wants on this particular
Okay,
issue
so
with my advice, I will take a
if the
look at.
president
But
tells you that this
I don't
common
believe
sense
the federal-
policy will not be maintained, you will not enable our service members to seek reproductive care. So it
I
sounds
don't
like
Mr. Sullivan,
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged,
Hey,
fully
you-
investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is
Senator-
that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she
I'm
was,
glad
and
she's
you
here.
cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
It
no,
was
do-
fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so
you've ad-
grateful
you've
for the marriage
admitted-
I have to this
No,
amazing woman behind me.
you've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against me,
You
fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
So you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but
fully
you acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath, like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. Your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
They're not anonymous.
The letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who've
seen
worked with
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to
Freedom,
them.
Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your-
to me
one of your
being
colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you deny these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I
attitudes,
think he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements
He's
to
way
women.
over his time.
But first, I want to say thank you for your strong proclamation, unapologetic proclamation of faith in Jesus Christ. I sat here and listened to your opening statement and thought, wow, this is a guy who in today's culture is willing to stand up and say the first thing is first, faith in Jesus Christ. And I was reminded of what Christ said in Matthew, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things shall be added unto you. You are going to have a great future as our secretary, and I look forward to that day happening. I are not the extremist. The people who would deny you your expression of faith are the extremists. They're the racists. They're the bigots. You're the one that is protecting their right to be one. Thank you for that. I want to go to another point in your opening statement. And it's summarized in this beautiful one-sentence paragraph. You said, quote, leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. At that moment, in my mind's eye, I heard soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, guardians, from the Pentagon to the Pacific and everywhere in between applaud. Applaud. And they're thinking, it's about time. I can get on board with that idea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles, because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely, because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards. Standards are what it's always been about,
let's not
Senator.
have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've quoted
standards.
you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk to you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about, because it's not one
think about it right now.
It's not one. My motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. But you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the
Oh,
president
I'll
is.
bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Because a man's made a mistake, and you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. And Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too. I have changed, but I'm not perfect. But I found somebody that thought I was perfect. And for whatever reason, you love Pete, and I don't know why. But just like our Lord and Savior forgave me, my wife's had to forgive me more than once too, and I'm sure you've had to forgive him too. And so thank you. So before I go down this rabbit hole again, tell me something about your wife that you love.
She's the smartest, most capable, loving, humble, honest person I've ever met. In addition to being incredibly beautiful. Don't forget about your kids. I'm supposed to talk about my kids?
No, well, she's also the mother.
Oh, an amazing mother.
Yes.
Of our
yes.
blended family of 7
Brother,
kids.
I'm pulling you
love
along.
her.
I'm trying to help you here.
Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led the largest, a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong, and that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes
my
or
leadership
no,
has
did you
been
lead an audit?
stated
Yes or
has
no?
been completely
What are you afraid of? You
mischaracterized.
can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every
Yes or
part
no?
of my leadership
Yes
of these
or no?
organizations
yes
has
or
been
no, did you lead an audit?
misrepresented
I will
from
take
top
that as
to
a no.
bottom.
What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day that, well, with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are 3 main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's 3 main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other
Okay.
than serving in the military. So my job has been to
So no, the
lead
answer is no.
men and
Can you
women in
name one of the
combat.
3 main ones that the
If you're
Secretary
talking
of
about
Defense
defense
signs?
arrangements, I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching
So-
about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't
inside
remember to mention
Afghanistan.
it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact
No, you
amount of
couldn't,
nations
because
in
you've
that,
not
but I
even
know we have
bothered to
allies
do-
in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, and trying to work
Okay.
on submarines with them.
Mr.
and data
Hegseth,
transfers
none
with
of those
them.
countries
We
are
have
in
allies
ASEAN.
across.
None of those 3 countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out 2 things to you, 2 sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a she-he, so I'm on board. What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30, Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell.